Good morning. Welcome back to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And this morning on Cool Your Heels with Lillian, our special guest is Mary Albertoli, who is a clinical social worker. And even though she's now working behind the lines, she's wants to do something about the high rate of suicide among teenagers. So good morning, Mary. How are you doing?
Great, Lillian. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
As soon as I saw what you were doing, I knew I had to have you on. So could you please introduce yourself as to who you are, your credentials, so people who are listening will know that you're the real McCoy?
Well, certainly. My name is Mary Albertoli. I have a master's in social work from Columbia University, which I practiced for about 12 years. And I worked in the area of children and families, primarily ones who had been admitted to the psychiatric hospital because of feelings of homicidal and suicidal ideation. I worked in groups, worked with not only the kids and the adolescents, but also the parents and families together in the group and individual setting. So thank you. And
Oh,
right now, yeah, I mean, currently right now, what we're stepping into is I am the creator and executive producer for a docuseries that I'm working on called The Shift. And our team is really devoted to switch and create effective forms of communication so that we can remove the stigma and the judgment and the shame that comes with sharing what we're feeling and thinking about our world and really open up the dialogue, especially in the teen and young adult population.
how prevalent now is the suicide among teenagers and young kids during the C virus epidemic?
So that's a wonderful question, and I need to do my research on that. I can only imagine what they're going through, because before we went into the virus, we had spiked up about 56% since 2007, the amount of suicides between with the age group 15 to 24. And it's frightening to see how kids have, or young adults have given up and give up on life and choose that for themselves, as opposed to having an effective conversation about what they're going through. And I think it's because we haven't provided them the means by which they can do that. I mean, some do seek mental health, and others, there's just not enough mental health workers out there to treat the amount of situations that this population is facing on a daily basis.
I think that mental health is a taboo subject, not so much with girls, but with guys. They'll never admit that they have a problem. And especially if they're a teenage boy, the first thing they'll say, well, it will have to go on my employment resume, and I can't afford that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've often wondered about that. And I know it's something I did not ask before, but why does it seem that boys and men have more problems in admitting that they can't have help for their mental distress?
Well, I mean, when you think about it in a way, there's no easy answer to that. But socialization certainly has taught us for years that men tend to, hold their emotions within, that they see it as weakness. And that's kind of unfortunate. However, with the talk about mental health a lot more in the world today, there may be a new leaf being turned around that. I do feel too that, many of the kids don't have the language to use to actually describe what they're feeling and the pain they're going through. And they're afraid because they think they're the only one having these feelings and thoughts. And also culturally, are they being taught to see any kind of problem emotionally or thinking wise as being that they're crazy? And it's so not the case. We all have these feelings and thoughts at one point. And certainly now with what's happening out in the world, many of us are unfortunately we don't have the help we need to talk about these serious situations and how we're coping with them.
Well, I think it's time we come out of the closet. So, with your work with teens, is that what really motivated you to become more involved and to offer practical solutions to parents and, I would say, adults who are with kids, teachers, professors, to start in on the documentary that you're doing about suicide?
Well, I was actually, I got to a point in my life where I had seen stories of 9-year-olds taking their life. And I actually got disgusted. I really got
I
disgusted.
got disgusted when I heard about it too. A 9-year-old, really?
Many of them have. And it was due to maybe peer bullying or whatever the situation they were facing. But I thought, my God, when did this become the case and the norm? And for me as a person here in this world, I can't tolerate that. I need to be able to step up and do something. It was a call to action for me. And through the conversations with many different producers, the producers on the show, the co-creators on the show, who have been a blessing to me to get this movement going and the show going, we are very excited to provide a platform on a national level, possibly international level.
Yeah, I would think an international level would make sense, because suicide in teenagers, I understand for the kids in Japan who just go to school nonstop 24/7, by the time they graduate, their sole motivation is to get a job. And then after they get a job, they fall apart, because the whole drive is the education and to get a good paying job. And then nothing else. That's it. You've accomplished your life's mission.
Yeah, and it's in the discovery process through conversation, we can understand what our youth are saying that they want for themselves. I mean, there's this idea that we assume we know exactly what they're going through and exactly what they need, and without the ability to really hear what they're saying on a larger scale, where kids can come on the studio, which is actually going to be an iconic bus. The bus is going to travel throughout the United States to many different areas where there's hot pockets of suicide or maybe another mental health disorder or issue that they're dealing with. I hate to use the word disorder, but it could be cutting, it could be bullying, it could be the coronavirus at this point, how they're dealing with that. The bus will travel and allow kids to come on the bus and have an expert involved to speak about what they're dealing with. Now, the whole premise is not to give answers, but to talk, to really stop the stigma and start the conversation. Let go of the shame that we've been carrying as human beings, that mental health and mental issues are just something that's very common. And I was surprised, even as a young adult myself, why things weren't talked about more, why people give themselves such a hard time for having thoughts and feelings that are uncomfortable, that they need to talk about. And it's okay to have those feelings, if that makes sense.
It does. And it's like a man stopping the car and asking for directions should they become lost. They rather drive in circles or run out of gas while they're trying to find a way out of the mess that they're in, because they're too stubborn to go and say, how do you get from here to there? Because John Wayne wouldn't do that. Daniel Boone wouldn't do that. The mountain men wouldn't do that. And that's the image that the United States has projected for men for decades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wouldn't even call it necessarily, it can be a stubbornness, but there's this belief that they need to be, or we need to be at a certain place when we're not. And it's all about, sometimes in our language, looking good. And you know what? Looking good really just leaves people at a loss for what they're really feeling. It's inauthentic. Because if I'm suffering inside and I'm not talking about it, how is that allowing me to, go through the possible emotional states that I need to heal? And how am I providing the opportunity for the person who I may be sharing with to talk about what they're going through?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what are your actionable solutions?
Well, in terms of discussions about mental health, we really have to look at the stigmatized thoughts and feelings we have about mental health internally. Like, what do I say to myself when I'm feeling depressed? Do I talk to someone? Do I say, get over it and power through it? What do we do? What do I do? And then let that go. Really let that go, as, there's a judgment that I'm having about myself for just going through the human experience. And that only stops me from being able to get to the next place or create a new space where I can feel more empowered. So it's really, if you're going to talk to a teenager, you really have to create relatability, trust, the sense that whatever they're holding back from you. I mean, there's so many homosexual young boys or men who contemplate suicide because they're afraid to talk about it. And I know people have their different feelings and their different emotions about homosexuality. The bottom line, it's not about you, it's about them.
Yes.
And, we really have to focus on letting go of whatever's in our space so we can be there for whatever our youth are going through and not make it about us.
I agree with you. I know that I was a single parent and I picked up 2 6-packs of beer, and I decided that I was going to drink them all because I felt so miserable because I was really having a hard time. But then I thought through, what are the consequences of this act? I was like 22, 23, and how
Right.
will it affect other people? So I talked myself out of it.
Good
And
for you.
I think that if we could make the teenagers understand that for every action, there is a reaction.
Well, I think about the subject of suicide, and people have said suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. There is so many times in my life, Lillian, I've lost many people in my life, and we've all gone through heartache and suffering that I would be a liar if I didn't say, why don't I just cash in my chips? But what keeps me going, what has kept me going, and what has kept a lot of teens going, at least, when we talk to them in our promo, is the ability to actually admit, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, and I know there's something off about it. Because there's something internally that is not healthy or not right about the way you're thinking. So it's like opening up and sharing that with another could give you the space to realize that A, you're not alone, and B, it's a normal process. You could be reacting to something situational. I think about an adolescent that I was working with in New York City, and she was a runaway and she was suspended multiple times for peer bullying. Come to find out, because she wasn't talking or opening up, through home visits and some authentic dialogue, and we finally were able to, and I needed a team of people to help me with her. She was being sexually molested by her father, and she didn't know how to open up about it because she was afraid that people would blame her. And once she did, we saw a lot of those behaviors become less. It's almost like we popped a pin in what she was suffering with, and we were able to get her the help she needed. But she kept that a long time secret. And as she was doing that, she was on her way to a conduct disorder. She was getting to the point where she was running in the streets and police were stopping her and picking her up. And she didn't deserve that. She was she was a victim.
She's being punished for something she had no control over.
She was punishing herself and then punishing others.
Exactly.
So it was like, right. And she didn't have the ability in the ego strength to say, I don't deserve this. And it was sad. And when she opened up, there was freedom.
It's almost when Ben was in the YWCA over in Houston, Texas. They're in a very large building. So they took a room and they padded it, ceiling, walls, floor, the whole 9 yards. Had the kids shimmy down to their, bra, underwear, boys, boxer shorts, and allowed them to go in there for 20 minutes to let go of everything that bothered them. And they could hurl themselves across against the walls and nothing happened except they would bounce back or something like that. My son told me it was the greatest way to let out your tears and everything else, and nobody would ever know. It's just between you and you.
Right.
And he said it really was great because it gave him an opportunity to let everything go, all the bad thoughts, all the nasty thoughts, and 15-year-old boys have a lot of nasty thoughts. And he just said it was an experience and that he used it quite often when he was in high school. He said it saved me from doing things that otherwise I would have done. He said some of my friends were cutting themselves.
Right. Yeah. And I think that there are many different modalities that can be utilized to help teen and young adults release whatever they're going through. I mean, with the shift, we're primarily going to do it through conversation. We find that in our language, that we create our worlds, that what we say about ourselves and each other and the world really comes to fruition in a lot of ways. So, I mean, what we're thinking and what we're feeling really needs to be unmasked. We really need to, on the show, our goal is to get the teenagers and the young adults to open up and really talk and really get to the heart of what it is that has been causing them so much pain and suffering. On the promo we had back, it was in November of 2018, we had 15 young adults and adolescents. They range from 14 to 24 years of age. And every one of them, and these were everyday kids, just shared from the heart what they were going through. And there was such a sense of release at the end of the show that many of them kept in touch with each other. They felt such a community had formed literally from one day of shooting the episode.
Yeah, I understand. I know that a lot of teens play these role games that they have. In Ben's day, it was Dungeons and Dragons. I understand now there are other games out there where they start identifying with the character so that they become that character and they lose touch with the reality because it's safer role playing or becoming that character than really dealing with the day-to-day stress. Do you also address youngsters to do that?
Well, I mean, whether you're young or adult, you can lose yourself in different things.
Yeah, I think
it's
an escape, basically.
It can be. I mean, it's really, there's so many things that can be said in terms of advice. And even though I'm a social worker, I'm not out to give advice. I mean, I think each child is an individual, each young adult is an individual, and they need to be seen as such. If they're seen as like a mass population, then they get discouraged and they get upset. We had another teen who said she was 14. She was horribly peer bullied. She had milk cartons thrown at her head a lot when she was in middle school. And she thought about taking her life and she didn't. But one thing she said on the promo is, I am so tired of the media and people seeing us as personas as opposed to human beings. Yeah. And there's this sense of like generalizing and not really taking the time to see our young adults as being fully capable people who have their thoughts and feelings. Now, they're still in development, granted, in many different ways. I mean, we know that, or we've, scientifically, physiologically, it says that the young adult brain is not fully developed into the 20s. Okay. So there are things we do need to become aware of. And to really know that these feelings and thoughts go on a deep level for many of these young adults and teens. So take what they're saying seriously. I hear a lot of stories of, I had no idea that he was going to take his life, or he mentioned it once, but I didn't think he meant it. It's like, take it seriously.
Yeah, you have to trust and respect your kid. You really have to respect them and let them know that you respect them and that you trust them. And whatever decision they make, you will stand by it. But you have got to keep the doors of communication open. And the best thing a parent can do is tape their mouth shut and listen.
Yeah, and that's hard for parents. And I get that, especially during this time when they're home with their kids now for like a month, 2 months on end. I get the stress of that, or it can be stressful. But the thing is, I invite you to do as a parent and as, even the teenagers and young adults, and the shift is getting ready to do some social campaigns, is to really say to yourself, how can I be generous in this situation? How can I really let go of my thoughts and feelings about this person and be generous to myself, not make myself wrong, but really say, we're going through something right now and let's just be there for each other. Let's let go of whatever it is that's in our space that's causing us to feel separate or disconnected.
And I think that is what is necessary. My last question is how effective is your conversations with the teens? And I think you've already answered that it's pretty effective, but it has to be a two-way street.
Well, certainly. I mean, when we did the promo, one of the things we did initially was we not only spoke to the kids in a way that made them feel safe and encouraged and really acknowledged for their bravery to get up there. And they were really acknowledged for the fact that they were sharing their lives in such a way that it could touch others and it can move other teenagers and young adults to share about what they're going through. So they were really seen as the voice. And I think that every child or every young adult who speaks on the show, The Shift, will be really acknowledged for their bravery and seen as the voice for other young adults and teens. I think that's what we need to do with our kids, is to really acknowledge them, and acknowledge ourselves too when we share about what we're going through. Knowing
Absolutely.
that it's not always the easiest. And
No,
yet, yeah, sorry.
go ahead. I was going to say that the parents should own the fact that maybe when they were that age, they also had thought about suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's important, I think, for a teen to recognize their parent as an individual and as somebody who also went through a tough time as a teenager, and hear how maybe they have
Yes.
resolved it. Because
Right.
sometimes a lot of these adult parents, they still haven't resolved those issues. And so
That's
they
very
kind of
true.
foster them on their own kids.
Well, of course, I mean, we know that, it kind of comes from the top down, so to speak. And I wouldn't make these parents wrong either,
No,
yeah.
but they
And
should
have them
acknowledge that they too have struggled with it.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And to see where, once again, the conversation that we're going to have on the shift is not only going to empower teens and young adults, it's going to empower the parents to see what is an effective way to have a conversation with my child or with my spouse, so that I'm not constantly going back to a place of resignation, where I'm not constantly creating in our relationship the same old you and the same old me. It's really saying we need to create a clean slate. We need to let go of whatever it is that in our conversations that are hurting each other. So it's really going to be teasing out our dialogue and our language, because I think it's all there, Lillian, in terms of how we are with each other, how we treat each other.
Yes.
And yeah, so that's something that the shift is going to be heavily teasing out through many different episodes, about maybe 13, 14. We're going to talk about, highly charged issues in a way that will allow people to diffuse the power that it has, and not be so much at the effect of it, but to cause something new in their conversation with each other.
And I think the most important question is, do you feel like mental health should be introduced to the schools, and maybe have a counselor of mental health there or a social worker there to be on hand should some of the students or a student express to his teacher or to his peers that's been overheard, I want to kill myself, or I want to bring a gun and kill all these people and then kill myself? Do you think that would make a difference?
Well, I think that there are some schools who have school psychologists and social workers, and others just can't afford them. I think it's more of an affordability issue. I think I think it should be mandated to have a school psychologist and a school social worker there, especially with what's been happening, with the school shootings. I think it's a mandatory thing.
Yeah.
I think, one of the things I really noted when I had this drive to be a social worker, now granted, I was a naive, maybe 21-year-old. However, I felt it was my duty to be on a mission to help others. And through the journey, I learned how to help myself, because I identified so much with what was going on that I was called to action to really get clean with myself about all of the situations that I had found myself in my life. And when I was able to let that go, I could really be there for someone else. So, but I do think that a social worker and a psychologist should be mandated in schools. Group therapy could even be something that could be available for kids in school. I know with teenagers, a lot of the kids, when they feel the only one sharing about something difficult, they won't talk. But when you get other kids who are brave to be a part of that group, you'll be surprised to see how they open up and how much they do want to talk.
I think it's a terrific idea. So, Mary, could you please tell everybody where they can find you and your organization on the World Wide Web, and anything else you want to add that you feel the audience should hear?
Sure. So we'll be launching our updated website on May 1st, 2020. It's www.shifttheshow.com. And you can follow us on Instagram at Shift the Show Official, and on Facebook at Shift the Show. And really, just everything starts in conversation. You are not alone, and you are not broken. And if you know of anyone you feel safe with, or someone you may be able to help open up, I urge you to speak out. If you don't know of that person that you feel safe with, you can text actually text the word home in capital letters, HOME, to this number, 741-741, and it will actually connect you to the crisis counselor at the crisis text line. We have a lot of different organizations that are pulling their resources to help support the need that will come from the shift in these dialogues. So they have agreed to work with us so that teenagers, young adults should feel free to text that line.
Terrific. Ladies and gentlemen, and adults of all ages, you've just listened to Cool Your Heels with Lillian, interviewing Mary Albertoli, who is the clinical worker, and she's working on a documentary with teenagers.
It's a docuseries.
The docuseries, thank you.
No worries.
And the bus will be traveling all over the United States of America. So please keep tuned for that. And
covering many different issues.
That's even better. So where can you see it? Well, you're watching it on YouTube and Facebook, so you know it's going to be there. It'll also be on LinkedIn /PWR Network. It will be on Twitter, PWR Network, at the PWTR Foundation. It's also found at https://passionateworldtalkradio.com. Right-hand side of the page, menu, Cool Your Heels, click on it, and you should see the video. The audio will appear on iTunes, iHeart, Spreaker, Podchaser, Google, Apple, and a host of others. You can even call it up in ALEXA, the Amazon version. But before you go away and stray, Grayson had this to say in 1647, the truth is generally seen, rarely heard. Thank you all very much for listening. And until next time, stay healthy.